There's a stretch of highway in northeast Oregon known as Wallowa Pass. It's Route 82, a winding road that connects the small towns of Enterprise and Joseph, and then curls toward the edge of the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest. In late October, the mountains are stunning. Golden larch, frost-tipped pines, fog curling off the ridges like smoke. But as beautiful as it is, locals avoid one particular stretch, a place they call Devil's Hollow. It's a drop in the pass, surrounded by steep forest on both sides, where the road narrows unexpectedly and the shadows never quite lift, even at noon. People have whispered about it for years, not loudly, just enough that if you stop at a gas station in Joseph and ask about hiking there, someone might tell you to stay out of the timber near mile 47. Not because of animals, because people vanish. For decades, strange disappearances have happened in that part of the forest. One in 1974. A surveyor named Ben Lasky, last seen walking toward the ravine. Another in 1991. A mother and son, their car found idling at a turnout. The boy's teddy bear was still in the back seat. No signs of struggle, no bodies, no clues. Then there was the most recent one, Dr. Sarah Bennett, a 36-year-old anthropologist from Portland State, who went missing in November 2018. She was conducting field research on ancient Nez Perce winter routes through the region. Her rental car was found just off the highway, engine running, boots beside the passenger door. A topographic map spread across the dashboard, partially marked in red ink. The forest was searched for 6 days. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers. They found nothing, not even a footprint. 4 years later, in 2022, I drove up that same road with 2 recording devices, a backpack, and too much confidence. My name's Daniel Rhodes. I produce a podcast called Blind Earth, long-form investigative stories on forgotten histories, unsolved disappearances, and urban legends rooted in real-world strangeness. I've covered the Wallowa Pass, the White Sands tapes, and a story on the Cold Hollow vanishings in West Virginia that made national press. I had read about Sarah Bennett months before, but kept coming back to the strange silence surrounding her case. The police reports were minimal. The local coverage was vague. Most of the information came from an old, archived blog that quoted a few local witnesses and then abruptly stopped updating. I decided to find out more. I arrived in Enterprise on November 18, 2022, 2 weeks before the official start of winter. The weather was dry but bitterly cold. I rented a small cabin near Wallowa Lake and started interviewing locals. The first was Sheriff Anna Metz, who had been working in the area since the early 2000s and had taken over as head of the department in 2019, just after Bennett's disappearance. She met me in her office just after dusk, her face lit by a dusty desk lamp and the pale glow of her computer screen. When I asked her about the case, she leaned back in her chair and went quiet. She wasn't the first, she said, but she was the one we thought we might find. The others, they were mostly back in the day, 70s, 80s, easy to write off. But Bennett, she was smart, methodical, sent location check-ins to her sister, left behind notes, then nothing, just a car door open and silence. I asked her what she thought happened. She didn't answer at first. There are stories about Devil's Hollow, she said finally. Most people won't tell them to you straight. They'll say it's just the wind, just the terrain. But I've been up there, alone, and I've heard things you can't explain. She paused, then said, 3 knocks. Always 3, I stayed silent. It sounds dumb, I know, she added. But people say if you hear 3 knocks in that stretch of woods, you turn around immediately. You don't knock back. You don't try to investigate. You just go. The next morning, I drove to mile 47. The road narrowed just as described, blacktop curling along a steep ridge with no shoulder, no guardrail. The forest rose sharply on the right, thick with larch, spruce, and ghost white fir trees, while on the left, the slope dropped hard into shadow. About halfway down the bend, I found the turnout where Bennett's car had been found. It was partially overgrown, the gravel barely visible under frost and pine needles. I parked, stepped out, and started recording ambient audio. The silence hit first. No birds, no rustling wind, just a thick, heavy stillness. Then, deep in the trees, a brief, hollow sound. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud, not close, just deliberate. My first thought was falling branches, but it was too rhythmically spaced, too intentional. I called out, half as a test, half to steady my nerves. Hello? Nothing. No echo. Just silence. I hiked about a quarter mile down an overgrown game trail from the turnout. The ground dipped toward a drainage culvert, a long, dark tunnel running beneath the road. It was partly collapsed, choked with vines, but large enough that someone could crouch and walk inside. I set a wildlife camera on a nearby tree and placed a directional mic near the entrance. The plan was to leave it overnight and pick it up the next day. Back at the cabin, I reviewed the ambient recording from the turnout. The knocks were clear, 3 spaced taps, followed by what sounded like movement in dry leaves. I isolated the sound and sent it to a friend at Oregon Public Broadcasting, who worked in audio engineering. He texted me 10 minutes later. That's not wind. It's something making contact with hollow wood or pipe, possibly metal. The next morning, I returned to collect the gear. The trail was untouched, but when I opened the wildlife camera, I found a single triggered frame. Time-stamped at 2:13 a.m., it showed a blur of pale grey, elongated, vertical, partially obscured by mist. No discernible face, no clothes, just a shape, human-sized, motionless. The microphone had recorded the same knocks. 3 taps, then silence. I went back that evening, determined to record overnight audio myself. I set up a lightweight tent at the edge of the turnout and kept my gear running as I lay in my sleeping bag, every sense tuned to the dark. At exactly 2:12 a.m., it happened again. Tap, tap, tap. This time followed by something closer. The sound of someone stepping slowly through dry brush. I held my breath, heart hammering. Then I whispered into the recorder. 3 knocks. Now footsteps, unsure if animal or person. The sound paused, then a voice. Not clear, not loud, but unmistakable. A single word, whispered from maybe 20 feet away. Go. I sat up instantly. Shaking, I turned on my flashlight and shined it toward the sound. Nothing, just trees, frost, silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I left the next morning, drove back to Portland, and spent the next week reviewing the recordings. Every time, the pattern repeated. 2:12 a.m. to 2:15 a.m. 3 knocks, footsteps, then silence. Once, a breathy voice. Once, a flicker of movement. My contact at OPB confirmed there was no evidence of audio manipulation or interference. I published the episode, The Last Light of Wallowa Pass, in December 2022. It quickly became the most downloaded in the show's history. Thousands of listeners wrote in, many sharing their own accounts of strange events in Oregon's timberlands, knocks, voices, missing hikers. A man from LeGrand claimed his brother vanished near the same pass in 1986, A retired USFS worker emailed me that the culvert had once connected to a decommissioned mineshaft sealed in 1953. In March 2023, the story caught the attention of a documentary crew who asked if I'd return to the site. I said no, not because I wasn't curious, but because there's a moment in any investigation, a moment when you realize the answers won't come in the form you expected. Sometimes there's no closure. Sometimes a place just takes. There's something about that stretch of forest, that cold silence, that doesn't feel natural. Not paranormal, not demonic. Just wrong in a way that settles in your bones. Like the ground remembers things, like it listens. To this day, no trace of Dr. Sarah Bennett has been found. Her sister still visits the area every year, leaves flowers at the turnout, says she still dreams of her walking down the trail, always barefoot, always smiling, just before she disappears into the trees. If you drive Route 82 this fall and find yourself near mile 47, don't stop. And if you hear 3 knocks, don't knock back.